So thank you everyone for coming. I'm so excited about this. Beth, yes, I'll do that. Just give me 1 second. I'm really excited about this. This is a really nice turnout. Thank you to Erin Sorensen of the Catskill Regional Teacher Center for helping us to set this all up. And thank you to Dr. Shanick for being willing to come talk with us. Jen Royce, do you just want to say something quickly about the CPD credits?
Yes, you can get 2 NASP CPD credits for this. If you need that, I will need to take attendance. So if you could put your name and your email address in the chat box, and then I will send you the evaluation form and the certificate of attendance after the meeting. It might be Tuesday when I get to it, but I will send it first thing that day.
And this will be recorded. It is being recorded, and we will send it out to our NIAS Chapter I, the listserv, after this. And if anyone else knows anyone that would like that recording, just have them contact me. So Dr. Shanick, I'm so excited about this. Dr. Shanick is someone that I know from the New York Association of School Psychologists. He's a professor of school psychology and the chair of his department at the College of St. Rose. And his primary area of interest is the CHC model, the cross-battery model of assessment, and especially how cultural and linguistic factors can impact performance and interpretation. And today he's going to talk with us a bit about RTI. So Dr. Shanick.
Ooh, RTI, yay. No, it all works out. So good to see everybody, and it's nice to see some familiar names and familiar faces, and I wish we were all together. Just quick, Andrew Shanick with the College of St. Rose. Go Albany, woo, go St. Rosebuds, I don't know what's going on. So I'm one of the past presidents of NIASP and currently the president of the Trainers of School Psychologists. So very exciting. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I keep doing these crazy things. I hope everyone had a good New Year and got some rest, for God's sake. And everyone's healthy and well. Just quickly about myself, I've been at St. Rose for about 15, 16 years now. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Prior to that, for many years, I was a school psychologist in Philadelphia, as well as in New York, all around New York. So I've been in suburban, urban, and rural districts in all different types of places. I wasn't fired a lot. I just happened to move and do those things. And one of the big things, like was talked about, is assessment is one of my big things that I do, but also trying to help out districts in trying to implement MTSS and RTI and trying to deal with some of that. And especially I have a special affection for the secondary level, because sometimes I think we get left out of a lot of conversations. And especially when we have to go to professional development, we're just like, what the heck does this have to do with us? And so hopefully when we talk about MTSS and RTI, it's just, there are lots of overlap between the secondary and the primary, but then there are some special little things secondary. When I'm thinking about secondary, I'm thinking about middle school to high school or junior high, whoever it is. I went to junior high, people went to middle school. I didn't know what that is. So all different types of things. The other thing, just as another quick thing, that what I'm looking at is about a 40-inch screen. And on my right, I have a bunch of I have all of your faces, or lots of faces, and then I also have the chat up as well. And this is so that I could see people rather than just talking to a void. So hopefully we'll have some back and forth along the way. I've tried to set up polls. So if you have your cell phone, I think you could put up to a QR code and do that. God help me, I don't know if this is going to work. I'm very excited about it. It's the first time I tried. So we'll see if it works. If it doesn't, who cares? We're all good to go. So, and by the way, if I'm talking fast now, this is me without caffeine. So enjoy the rest of the way. So, but please type in any questions you may have in the chat, and I'll try to look at that as well. Just a quick advertising for St. Rose. We have this great scholarship called Thrive. And it is to try to increase the amount of the folks who are from underrepresented populations within school psychology. They'll get 2 out of the 3 years paid for of tuition. So if you know anybody who's interested in school psychology and they might be from an underrepresented group, tell them to apply. The same thing, this also goes for those who might be interested in a career in special education. To be a special education teacher, they would also get tuition paid for as well. So if you go to our website, you'll find about Thrive. So I'm happy to talk about that later on. So just some of the basic goals. Let's talk about the national mood. We have to, no matter what, because that's impacting all of us. We can't even believe that you've been spending 2 hours to do this craziness based on things. The system issues that's impacting how we're implementing MTSS. The consistency of language. Is everyone saying the same thing, or do we talk past each other, which I find most often? Defining dyslexia. What exactly is that? And then always going through some of the special considerations for MTSS at the secondary level. And that I'll be providing also some various free resources along the way so that people have to learn about reading, writing, and behavior. Reading, writing, math, and behavior. So that you have some easy resources to build your own bank with. I'll also be setting up a Dropbox and this is not the Dropbox I'll be setting up, it's just a random picture of some stuff. But I'll set up a Dropbox because I don't have a website, and I'll be including lots of resources in that, and I try to build in those resources. So if people email me, I'm happy to give them a link to that. And I'll say my email address one more time here, even though you have the recording for it. So I'll say it and then I'll spell it. So it's shanock@strohs.edu. So it's SHANOCKA@strose.edu. And if someone wants to put that in the chat box, that's fine as well. And but you're welcome to email me anytime. It makes me feel popular when people email me, so it's very good. So excellent. So yeah, so let's see if this works here. And so here's a poll. And so if you have your phone, I'm just kind of interested here. What percent of kids in your secondary school you think who are receiving academic interventions are actually closing the gap? That they are really, it's getting so much better, that they are making super progress along the way. So here we have some votes. Oh, so the voting's working. This is great. Look at this. This is fun. Very good. So we'll give another minute or two and people can take their phone and scan that for a little bit here. So we have 12 here. So some and few is taking the lead here. And there's a not sure. Some and few. So we'll give it another minute or two. Just kind of curious, get a feel of the room here a little bit. So what I did is I went to Slido, slido.com, and it took me 2 seconds to set this up. So just for those others who are doing presentations, this is pretty damn easy. Uh-oh, right, or few is now taking the lead. This is exciting. It's like watching a horse race here. So we have 29. I'll wait another like minute or two and see people that anyone else wants to vote. Well, I could say, well, good, that's not hardly any. Isn't it interesting that for most of us, in terms of where we are, in terms of MTSS, that we've been doing it, and that we don't have most are closing the gaps, but that it might be less than 50% of kids might be having some difficulty or not really making the progress that we want to see. And what exactly is that progress? And it's fun when it's always interesting when I go to like an RTI presentation, they always say, well, you just have to do that and you just have to do this. And my first question is always, how's RTI and MTSS going for your district? And usually there's lots of giggles and laughter around it because there are so many different components, and just trying to do it all, it just feels overwhelming. And it's never sure of like what the data, nobody knows if people are really making the progress that they need. And so it's really trying to figure it all out. And that what I'll say is that what you're doing is probably awesome, and that this is around the whole country. That if you have issues with MTSS and RTI, and you're just like, I can't believe this district, I don't know if that makes people feel better, but when I go to districts around the country, they say the same things they say here in New York. So, but it's interesting that it's few, and this might be some type of survey poll that you might want to do for your teachers, because if they all say that few or that less than 50% are doing well with the academic interventions, that some of the changes that you want to make in terms of MTSS, that if there's less than 50% that's making the gains that they need, for those teachers that might be resistant to making any changes to what the curriculum is or what type of data to collect, this is data to say, well, we're not doing well by more than 50% of our kids are not making the progress they need. So we need to change something. And so this is an easy survey to do and try to help out and try to get a sense of what's going on with the teachers and where we need to go. So just talking about COVID along the way, clearly has been an impact. I mean, it's just been brutal. Just in going to all the different districts and just everyone's kind of tired, and just the slog that it feels like right now has been really difficult. In October, when I was visiting districts, it felt like February. Did other people have that? That just felt like a February slog in October, and that the summer was definitely not long enough as a time to kind of recharge our batteries. Let's go here. Yeah, that the winter break definitely was not long enough. Just kind of exhausted from things. I'm getting a lot of feedback saying that there's a lot of behavioral concerns in the school buildings right now, that kids are just acting like they've never acted before. Yes, no, in general. Yeah, thank you for the thumbs up, and you can write yes or whatever might be in the chat to help me out a little bit. That, you know, and also I hear that kids are acting immature. I'm like, well, they haven't been taught anything of how to act as their age. So I'm not sure what immature might be, but boy, there just seems to be a lot more mental health concerns, a lot more behavioral concerns for prepping for classes. That I don't know if people have seen this slide before, this memo, meme or whatever it might be. I still like showing it because it is shocking that in 7th grade, their last normal year was in 4th grade. It's crazy. And significant mental health concerns, particularly in the middle school level. Yeah. That if they haven't been in school and have been used to that structure for all those years, and then as a 7th grade teacher, the prep time has been completely different. You have to prep for 7th grade, 6th grade, 5th grade, and 4th grade. That all the prep you've done in previous years is just out the window. And because you have all these different level of kids in the school, and it's just it's too much. And so I think the teachers are tired and they're not sure of what 7th grade or 6th grade might mean anymore. That what to expect as a 10th grader. We're getting mixed messages that sometimes you hear, teach the kids where they're at, but then administration also says, don't forget about the state standards and you better make sure they reach the 10th grade level and they do everything that a 10th grader is supposed to do. In the meantime, you're like, well, the kid can't decode any words. Well, they still have to read Shakespeare. So you get these mixed messages, and so teachers are unsure, and administrators are also unsure. They want to do the best they can for schools, but they're not necessarily sure of how to kind of go about it because this is just a different era. My clicker is not working so wonderful here. So I don't know if people have been finding this, but there have been just a flood of referrals, or at least I've been concerned about the flood of referrals, especially for those for specific learning disability and at the secondary level, because they haven't been taught for so many years. And so they're so far behind that they've been identified for either, Sarah Sanders saying so many, that we're just getting overwhelmed by the number of evaluations. And then what do we have to come back with? That the kid is fine. When we do in our assessments, we're going to say they're average, they're okay. They're just because they haven't been taught anything. So we have to distinguish between dyspedagogia, or just not being taught, versus a kid who truly has a learning disability. That we're just over-identifying or just getting just overwhelmed with these different referrals of what to do and how do they go to the different tiers. It's going our way. Yeah. that some of the impacts that I think is that we really do have to adjust in the pre-K referrals. Oh my God, it's just been out of control, right? Everyone, and I think also the anxiety. Right now in our schools, we have lots of kids with anxiety and depression, but we also have lots of families with anxiety and depression. And we also have lots of teachers with anxiety and depression. And we're trying to mix all these folks together and say, let's make it all back to normal again. And it just can't be. That's, yeah, the Wall Street Journal talking about the confronting misbehavior. That what is misbehavior? That what does that tier 1 look like for in terms of social emotional functioning? That I don't know if schools have really been prepared for it, how to address this stuff. But it's also, what is that scope and sequence that has to be taught in the various courses? How well do we know as school psychologists in terms of what is the typical scope and sequence of reading, writing, and math, and even what behavior expectations there are? And that in terms of data collection, we need good data collection because we need to know that it has to be about the top 80% is your tier 1. But what's going on is that so many kids are below benchmark or below where they usually are. They're saying the whole class is at tier 2 or tier 3. That's not possible. So you have to look at your district individually and identify, because the resources are we don't have enough resources to address so many kids at tier 2, tier 3. We all know that 80% should be a tier 1. Yes, right? That's the general gist. That your bottom 20% really need that additional care. So if I have a school district, I worked at the Philadelphia school district many years ago. And at the time, all urban districts were 1 standard deviation below the national norm, and Philadelphia was 1 standard deviation below urban districts. So goodness, their top 80% is well below the national norm, but that top 80% is my tier 1. That bottom 20%, I need to address allow them to access the various resources in terms of tier 2 and tier 3 type of assistance. And right now, what's gone on, at least I see in different districts, and I ask the teachers, I'm like, so what percent of kids do you think is in tier 2, tier 3? And they're telling me 60%, which tells me that tier 2 and tier 3 is not happening. Are others having that? Just, you could type in the text box, chat box, whatever it is. I just want to make sure that I'm right on this. That we have to get out the word in terms of there hasn't been a loss of teaching. But I mean, there hasn't been a learning loss, but there's been a loss of teaching. That once you learn how to read, you don't forget how to read. Once you know your math facts, you know your math facts. But everyone's been talking about this loss of learning, and that's kind of putting it on the kids in so many ways, rather than what we need to do. And we have to start, this is much easier said than done, but spending time in community building. How are we building that community? How are we building those types of social emotional supports for the kids so everyone gets back to what community is, that we cannot have via Zoom. Even doing this conversation itself is hard, because I'm looking at, like, trying to figure out faces, trying to read off faces, but are you looking at the screen, not looking at the screen, getting that feel? We don't have that, but now when we're in person, we need to kind of rebuild that community. And people who know me always sees this slide kind of thing, because when I start thinking about why do people, when people refer, are they really do they give us the right language, or do they actually understand why a kid might be having some difficulty in whatever they're doing? That I always talk about this whenever I'm at some type of IEP or IST meeting or pre-referral meeting. I always get this fanning going on that the teachers love to say that, oh, this kid has a processing problem. And they love to fan themselves when they say that. Like, he has a processing problem. I'm like, what? They go, he has a processing problem. I'm like, are you hot? What's wrong with you? What's with this? And they're like, well, the kid has a processing problem. I'm like, okay, so do you mean their working memory? Do you mean that it's their reasoning skills? Which processing issue do you think it is? And they're like, oh, that's a great question. And they go, oh, it's a processing problem. I'm like, okay, so you don't know. But now what people love to say, and I've heard that, I've been in multiple meetings this year, they're like, he has executive function issues. Yeah. I'm like, so which executive function do you mean particularly? Do you mean that he has difficulty shifting? Do you mean he has difficulty initiating? Do you mean he has difficulty organizing? Which executive function does he have difficulty with, so we can provide the right intervention for the kid? But we just kind of hear executive function. Everyone at the meetings just nod their heads. We have to stop nodding our head, and then we have to start asking questions. And the same thing in terms of how IEPs, the same thing, are not really individualized. They're all GEPs. Everybody who comes into an IEP, they're going to get double the amount of time to read a book they can't read. They're going to get moved closer to the board. And they're going to get tests read to them, or they'll have extra time on task. Well, what exactly are the goals, and what are we trying to do for those kids? But that can't be for every single kid. That do people agree to this? That a teaching method might work with all students some of the time. And a teaching method might work with some of the students all the time. But a teaching method doesn't work with all students all the time. Everybody seems to agree to this. But who are the kids that get referred for tier 2, tier 3, or for instructional support teams, or for special ed? It's those kids who are not responding to what's going on at tier 1 in terms of how I'm teaching or how I'm presenting that material. But all teachers, everyone, all educators seem to agree to this. So you can't agree to this and then say, well, all my kids are at tier 2, tier 3. Because ultimately special ed is not extra help, nor is AIS. And that ultimately we have to make the intervention special, not these different places. Are people getting a sense that there are just way too many kids now just being referred for special education? That teachers are now telling parents you have to get this kid extra help, and they're saying bypass the whole PST, IST process, right? And by the way, at the IST process, is anyone bringing any data? No. Or do they even know what data they're bringing? I'm sure I'll say this later on. They just bring star data sometimes, or map data, and they just say he's at a 345. Everyone goes, oh. But no one knows exactly what that might mean. But people love to say numbers or letters. I'm going to skip over this. Well, I'll show. Let's just see if this works in terms of. I just want to share this, and hopefully this works here. Let's see if this sounds familiar or not. Let's go here. Let's go here. And I'm showing this in the middle of the way, but I just want to see if this sounds familiar at all. It doesn't matter what level you're on.
Let's get started.
Agreed. What do we need to discuss regarding Jimmy?
He is struggling with
you hear
his
this, Jen?
academics.
In what area specifically?
Yes.
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 How do you know he is struggling?
I have a work sample.
You have a work sample?
Yes.
A work sample.
Yes.
A work sample. What does this work sample indicate?
He is struggling.
In what academic area is he struggling?
Yes.
What is the work sample a sample of?
It is a sample of his writing. It is hard to read his writing. Let's put him in special education.
Because of his work sample in writing.
Yes.
What interventions have you tried?
We have tried many interventions.
Such as?
I moved his seat to the front of the class.
To help him with his writing?
Yes.
I wouldn't imagine that would help him improve his writing.
Precisely. He didn't get better in reading or math either. Let's put him in special education.
How would that help?
It would be a seat moved even farther.
What other interventions have you tried?
I called his mother.
And did this help?
No, it did not. Let's put him in special education.
What other interventions have you tried?
But that's 2 interventions already. Are you trying to sabotage this?
No. I'm trying to use best practice. What other interventions have you tried?
I almost forgot. I also gave him response to intervention.
That's great. Response to intervention is best practice. What specifically did you do?
I gave him response to intervention.
You gave him response to intervention.
Yes. Isn't that best practice?
Well, yes. How did he receive it?
Not well. Let's put him in special education.
I'm not sure that would be best practice.
Well, let me know how that evaluation goes. Thank you for this effective meeting.
Yes, that seems to be my crazy meetings all the time here. Of people unsure of what data to bring, what type of data do we need to collect at the secondary level, and just how to kind of communicate the specific skill, behavioral or academic wise, that is more specific to what's going on, so we can provide the right intervention. That here's the fancy way of looking at MTSS. It's shared leadership, database problem solving, all the craziness. I'm trying not to show the triangle, by the way. I'm doing whatever I can not to show the RTI triangle. So I'm going to create the RTI rhombus someday just to annoy people.
Andrew Shanick, come here.
Hi, Lynn. How are
Listen
you?
to this presentation by Andrew Shanick.
Listen, Lynn, are you talking again, Lynn?
Looks like a happy guy.
Lynn thesis having, there you go. There's Lynn. So that, yes, you'll get a copy of the PowerPoint. So absolutely. So here are some of the basics around what MTSS is. It's dealing with behavior and academics, additional learning supports. It's for all students all the time. But ultimately, it's this: a systematic use of assessment data to most efficiently allocate resources in order to enhance learning for all students. That's the end game here. But how well are we really allocating resources? That as some folks, and I tend to agree in some ways, at the high school level, it might be just necessary to have 2 tiers rather than 3 tiers. I was just listening to Mark Shin talk about that, the godfather of all this stuff. And he was also talking about 2 tiers, like at the 10th, 11th, 12th grade level. But maybe a 7th and 8th grade, maybe more 3 tiers that you could still do. But if we're doing 60% of kids is a tier 2, tier 3, then we are not allocating our resources appropriately. So we have to do a better job of trying to figure out where we're going to go with all this. That for a lot of classes, it doesn't matter what grade this says, grade 1, grade 10, whatever it might be. But if I have a class like this, and green means that things are going well, yellow is okay, red, things are not going well. This is what a lot of classes look like right now. And the teachers are referring from number 4 to all the way to 23, even up to 47. They're referring all those kids. Well, that's just crazy. This is a whole class intervention that we have to do, rather than about 10 different referrals. So sometimes when we look at the benchmark and cut scores and kind of thing, we have to identify, is this a whole class? Or are we able to kind of address maybe a couple of the kids who are at the bottom? So student 4, 12, 12, 13 might be really tier 2, tier 3 kids, whereas everyone who's 14 and above is gonna be my tier 1 kids. Imagine saying that now to faculty, that those kids who are at this frustrational level are going to be general education tier 1 kids. We need to do better classroom intervention and change up our curriculum and scope and sequence. That's a heavy lift, and that's a difficult thing to ask of folks. But the same point, I just had it the other day, I swear, she said, so I did a reading comprehension measure that was well above his reading level, and he did poorly on it. I was like, I hope so. It was above his reading level. He could barely decode, and you gave him a reading comprehension, and you did this assessment. Why'd you do the assessment in the first place? Do anyone have like the IST forms or pre-referral forms where it says phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension? Do people have that type of form? And I like when people check off everything. I'm like, wait a minute. If he can't decode words and he doesn't have fluency in anything, I hope he doesn't have fluency, of course he's not gonna be able to comprehend. So he doesn't have all those issues. We have to go back and kind of figure out which skills are the kids missing, so we could bring up the whole class. The same thing here, that if I had, and here, if the black line is to be by benchmark, if I had in normal times that this is my class and these kids in red are below the benchmark, those are my tier 2, tier 3 kids, then you know what? I go about my scope and sequence and 95% of the kids get a 3 on the statewide test, so they all pass the Regents exam. Year 2, everybody passed the Regents exam. Year 3, everybody passed the Regents exam. Same group of kids in September that I find out kind of look like this. So my scope and sequence seems to be working year in, year out, and I'm successful. That about 90% of my kids are passing the Regents exam, away I go, year in, year out. And then 1 year I get something like this. In September, I need this data. Sometimes the STAR data doesn't really help us with this. It takes too long to get the STAR data. Do other people agree with this? Or the MAP data or the NWEA stuff? Yes. That sometimes it takes a while to get there and people don't know what the data means. But either way, if I see this easily, and it has to be easily accessed, that if I see this in September, there's no way I could teach the class like I did the previous years. But if I have this, which is what you see a lot of teachers have right now, they're not sure what to do. And that's where the school psychologist has to come in and say, this is a whole class intervention that we have to think about the tier 1 level of what we're going to do for this class. And I'm talking both elementary and secondary level at this moment, but still the same principles apply no matter what. So when we talk about MTSS, it includes all of this. And this slide is a nice slide because I don't feel so overwhelmed, but also, goodness gracious, that's a lot. Attendance, academics, behavior, social emotional, suicide prevention. But if I look, if I get my slides moving, that'd be nice. It's this. Oh my God, this slide gets me anxious. In terms of trying to address all these different issues, there's a lot of stuff that we have to kind of figure out. So we have, about another hour and a half to kind of go. We're not going to come to all the different conclusions in order to solve all this. But this is a helpful kind of chart for people to have, so they start to get a sense of what really needs to be done, especially at 7th and 8th grade level. And I could talk about the high school level in a moment. But if you look at the academics on the left there, that if your screen's big enough, I don't know if it is, but if you look at tier 2, it talks about providing 30 to 45 minutes of instruction 3 to 5 times per week, tracking 12 to 14 data points, and doing an 8 to 15 week cycles. 15 weeks, 3 months. We have to help people along to understand that we're not trying to cure kids, we're providing treatment to kids. That what happens is that often they'll say that my kid's in 7th grade reading at a 3rd grade level. And by the way, does anyone know what I meant when I said 3rd grade level? Nobody does. But how often have you had that conversation, by the way? Nobody knows what specifically they mean by a 3rd grade level. Does that make sense? We have to get better with the language that we're using. Nobody knows what that means. Nobody can tell me what that means. And if you could tell me, someone else will not be able to tell me the same exact thing that you're thinking at the moment. But that if I gave that kid the very best intervention, do you think that kid would be reading at grade level anytime soon? The answer is going to be no. But we have to see a slope of progress to show a closing of that gap, especially at the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade level. That do you have kids that are having difficulty in reading? Do you have kids that have difficulty in math or writing? You absolutely do. And so I had one case where it was a high school kid who was a 9th grade kid, and the teacher said, this kid doesn't know his multiplication facts. It's too late, so we're just going to use a calculator. I'm like, what do you mean it's too late? He's 14. He's barely cooked. We need to provide the right treatment for that kid and show the right progress for that kid, because otherwise you're doing all this crazy algebra with him and he's not going to do well. So we have to have people to understand that this is a lifelong treatment that we're going to be doing, that to think of the medical model, that these kids are not going to be cured right off the bat. And in fact, parents don't expect the kids to be cured. I talk to so many parents. I'm like, so do you expect this kid to be reading at grade level tomorrow? And they're like, absolutely not. What they want to see is that this kid is making progress. But let's say, just using language, I know I come up with language later on, a kid is at the 8th grade level reading at a 3rd grade level. Is that kid struggling? The answer is yes. At the end of the year, we do a really good intervention with the kid. Is the kid still, quote unquote, struggling in comparison to his peers? The answer will still be yes. So I want to get away from using statements, and this is how to kind of work your RTI and MTSS, is to get people to use better language. Because to say the kid is struggling at the beginning of the year and still struggling at the end of the year tells me nothing. I want to know where they started and where they are at in real quantifiable terms. Without that, we're just having conversations that mean nothing. And you've all been in those meetings, yes? From IEP meetings to IST meetings, you're sitting there like, what the freak are we talking about here? We have to get those meetings better, that it's all going to be quantifiable and good information all the way through. Here's a flow chart that everybody should have in their manuals at the schools to know what's tier 1, what's to be expected, what data do people have to bring to these pre-referral meetings, how long of an intervention are we going to do? And by the way, I'm saying an intervention, most people don't know what I mean by the word intervention. They think by calling a parent is an intervention. So we have to get that language fixed at both the elementary and the secondary level. But this is a lot of work. And that's why, if I think about this, this is where the resources come in. And at the secondary level, I know it's on a later slide, what we have to determine is, does the kid need skill building or do they need content help? So are we doing a specific intervention for skills such as phonics, fluency, phonemic awareness? Or do we have to do some content support? The kid doesn't really understand chemistry, but it's not because of their weak reading, writing, or math skills. So you have intervention versus, or treatment versus support. That's really at the secondary level. Does that make sense, that difference? Because right now, all the kids will be thrown into AIS when some kids need content help and a lot of the kids need more skill development help. So at the secondary level, I would ask your AIS teachers or resource room folks, how many here need skills? How many here need content? And get a sense of that. Here's for social emotional flow chart. The same, this is, I'm going to be primarily talking about academics throughout this because it's just impossible to talk about all of this within 2 hours. But, and by the way, this is by Gary Schaefer, who put together all these charts. He's just great at this. And so his book is coming out in August. So he's terrific. And it's a great book that'll be coming out. So I had the title there at the top right there. But how is your PBIS going? Does everyone know what tier 1 is? I'm doubtful of that. And that's not because of any malice. No one means any malice to any of this. Everyone's trying their hardest, but people are unsure of what the flow is supposed to be and what the specific intervention should be. So that I happen to like this document. It's called the Mental Health Education Literacy in Schools. We don't even have PBIS. Yeah, it's just, but even just understand that if you say PBIS, people are like, is that public broadcasting television? Is that what you're talking about? They don't even know what that is at the moment. So people are unsure of what behaviors that we need to do. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a moment. But this is a great document because it provides you with what the tiers look like in all different types of mental health implementation of MTSS, whether you're coming from a trauma point of view, restorative justice point of view, a PBIS point of view. This provides all tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, gives a really nice description of everything. And it also provides a lot of the language that you need everybody to be on board with and to be saying. Here's another page of it for tier 1. So I think it's just nice because if I go to one district, they're doing trauma sensitive. If I go to another district, they're doing PBIS. To say that each should be the same is not going to be true. So you have to figure out what's best for your district. And by the way, just as school psychologists, how well do we know all of these? And most likely we don't. There's no harm in that. But if you pick one, that's the one that you want to do and get really good at so that you can provide better support for the educators. I happen to like this website. This is an old slide of the website, I believe. But the SAMHSA website, if you type in a certain social emotional, like if there's an area of social, like depression, it'll pop up a whole bunch of different programs that you could do, and it'll tell you about maybe the cost, what grade levels. It gives you a whole host of information on it. It's a great website, just so that if you want to implement something, this is one of the great places to go to, I find at least. But ultimately, when we talk about MTSS, it really is all means all. And leadership is so critical in all this, that if the leadership is not there, or the leadership doesn't understand what the overwhelming nature of MTSS, then everything else is going to collapse. I'm sure people have found that, especially now, aren't administrators leaving left and right? Educators leaving left and right. So we have a lot of history that's leaving left and right. But I really like this, what Boston Spa, this is a district in my area, did. They did a really nice job of just kind of putting it out there of what MTSS is, so that everybody gets a sense of what things we need to be talking about. And that any agenda that I would have within this district would have to be related to one of these principles. That why is this on the agenda? Well, it's because we need to deal with peer support. And this is going to address, I don't have time for meetings. I need the meetings to be pointed and to be related to certain goals that we have. So when I think of just an overall implementation of MTSS, to have this information and everyone have the same language is going to be critical. And again, this is from Gary Schaefer as well. When I think about just NASP and school psychology, he did a nice crosswalk. Is that good? I have to say crosswalk. In any meeting, you have to say crosswalk now, much like you have to say pivot. Have we all pivoted at this point? I pivoted so many times, I don't know how to pivot anymore, for God's sake. So that, but this is a nice document here in terms of why are we doing this in the first place, or how does this relate to our training? And that we are the best in terms of data collection. We are the best at data analysis. We are the best at data decision-making, and we have to use those skills to be able to help out the rest of the education faculty and let them know what's going on and provide them with some guidance around that. And here's just your definition of RTI. I always like this. It's the practice of providing high quality instruction. Can we just get quality instruction? What's with the nonsense of high quality? I still can't, it's like extra strength Tylenol. I just want medication that's going to help me make my headache better. I just want to get to quality instruction, but we have all this pressure on us, high quality instruction, high, there's something about instruction or something like that. Or high, what's the test they call it? You know, something high test, whatever it is, you know, all the tests they have to take always have this like extra adjective on it to make it even worse, right? I'll settle for consistent instruction. Yes, my God, high stakes. Thank you very much. Right. High stakes testing, high stakes. What is that? It's terrible. Highly qualified, right? I just want someone qualified. If I'm qualified, I'm happy. I'm not setting the standards low, but I just want to be qualified to do what I'm supposed to be doing. So, but it is to make all the decisions, and we need quantifiable data all the way throughout. And so, but I just want to come back a little bit here and just talk about why MTSS and RTI is so difficult to do at both the elementary and the secondary level. And even though this is elementary, this still deals with the secondary level, and I'll get to that in a moment. But this was done in 2015, and they looked at RTI. I don't know if people have seen this before, but this is, so it's about 6 years old, that they looked in 13 states with 146 elementary schools that were doing RTI for at least 3 years and doing it pretty good in reading. So in 13 states, 146 elementary schools, and this is what they found. Assignments tier 2 and 3 had a negative effect on performance for first graders, and the estimated effects on reading outcomes for grade 2 or 3 are not statistically significant. What the heck are we doing all this for? If we can't get, at the basic level. And does this surprise anybody? This doesn't surprise, everyone kind of knows it. But my rationale for this is I'm a huge proponent of RTI, huge proponent of MTSS and doing this. But I think a big issue is around this, that if you look at the teacher prep review, and I'm not talking just about teachers, I'm talking about school psychologists, administrators, whatever it might be. Well, what they found is that 1% of 201 graduate elementary programs cover the topics to teach math. 1%. So teachers coming out of their programs, 1% know how to teach math, maybe. Do you understand why there's so much math anxiety? If we don't know how to teach it in the first place, all we're doing is using our teacher manual in order to teach math. At the same point, how well do we know math as school psychologists? Not so well. How are we supposed to provide a good intervention for math if we're not really sure about it? And we have to start acknowledging this. As educators, we have to start acknowledging that we're not so sure about reading, writing, and math because it also looked at reading, and that's what it found was that of all the schools, now we're getting better at it, 68% of teacher education programs are teaching about how to teach reading using phonics and understanding phonics. I usually don't say only or just, but that's an only. We have far too many teachers are thinking that this balanced literacy approach is the approach to help out kids in reading when it doesn't help out kids. And as high school educators and school psychologists, I need to know what's going on in the elementary school and how they're being taught how to read, because if I don't, I'm not going to understand why the kid is having difficulty in our high school classes. And unfortunately, for a lot of what's going on at the elementary, a lot of kids were not taught how to read correctly. So that's impacting where they're coming up here, and I'll show that also in a moment. What about behavior management? That if blue is traditional graduate programs, 32%, and this is back in 2018, those teachers were taught how to use praise to encourage positive behavior. That's crazy. So now if we want to implement PBIS, think about all the professional development we need to put into that. So it becomes of no one means any malice. Everybody's working their tails off at school. It is a miracle what goes on in schools all the time. I love walking through the different schools. I like going to different classes. I am stunned by what's being taught in the classes and what the kids know. But those kids who are at the bottom, that bottom 20%, are really struggling. And the teachers want those kids to be successful. They're dying for those kids to be successful, but they don't know what to do. But also I have to say that, that how well do we understand what is writing, what is reading, what is math, and what is behavior in order to provide the right interventions or to help out teachers to understand those different interventions. So if we want to talk about successful implementation of MTSS or RTI, in part, there's going to be part of the work in terms of focusing maybe for a couple of months just on what are the best practices in reading. And then the next couple of months, do focus on what are the best practices in math, just to build our own skill base in order to help out the other educators. Have you all been to IST meetings where everyone's just talking around the problem? And then we say the kid's going to come back in 8 weeks and we'll see what happens? and there's no quantifiable data, there's no understanding of what specific intervention has to be done, especially at the secondary level. I've been at those meetings. It's stunning. And they spend hours in the meeting. I don't know how they do it. It's because people are unsure of what to do, and they start talking about, families, all this other kind of stuff, rather than talking about what the specific skill they have to do. So what do we know? Can we brainstorm without knowledge? So we all have to be part of that. So I'm going to play this and see if this sounds familiar. Let's hopefully this works. And this is from Mark Shin. So let's do this. Let me share. It's here. And hopefully you all could hear it. There it is. Okay. So listen to this kid read. This is a 7th grader, I believe. And listen to this kid read, and let's see what happens here.
When I say begin, I want you to read across the page. Try to read each word. If you come to a word you don't know, I'll tell it to you. Be sure to do your best reading. Are there any questions?
Nope.
She's gonna read for 1 minute.
Begin.
After Bennington, Newtown, 9 years old Samantha and her 12-year-old brother Robert had heard of an old toboggan slide from some of the other neighborhood children. They decided they needed to check it out. So suddenly, what is this word? Supposedly, it was on the north side of the Peninsula in the middle school of the lake behind their new home. Paddling lazily, they had crossed the lake in their canoe. Just as they had been told, there was the decrepit wooden frame toboggan slide. They slid it, and
Stop.
Okay, this 1 minute short oral reading test gives us a lot of information about how well the student reads or navigates 7th grade level text. And I think most of us would agree, not very well. My question is, what intervention would this student receive in your high school?
So that's the question. And you can put in the chat box in terms of what would that kid get? We all know she's not a good reader. So we have resource, it's HA resource from DCT. So maybe an intensive reading class, that would be amazing. So now we may get testing. We may test the kid. None. I mean, let's try. Let's see this one. Okay. What would happen? Right. The kid, yeah, I heard the kid read the word decrepit. AIS, it's funny, and this is good, AIS in reading, but what was her comprehension like? Here's the question. What would you suspect her comprehension to be? If she's having a hard time reading the words, how could she possibly comprehend? So the only intervention we provided reading was code knowledge, right? So her reading comprehension is going to be poor, right? So we have to, those kids often, I see the same thing. I think it's great to ask about comprehension. But that kid needs an intervention in decoding and breaking down words, morpheme knowledge. But how often do you have that at the high school? What they'll do is they'll do read 180 or something like that, or do some comprehension kind of stuff. So, or maybe help with homework or give extended time, reteach the material. And we're going to misunderstand listening comprehension for reading comprehension rather than doing a specific intervention. And be careful with tracking visually. That sometimes people talk about visual spatial reasoning as an issue for reading. It's not. It's rarely a case. So just be careful with that, especially when, you know, there's another slide later on that talks about being a visual learner versus an auditory learner. There's no such thing. And we have to get rid of some of those myths. But I think that's interesting that for those kids that may have difficulty, that truly have difficulty tracking visually, that how they can use a finger or an index card to help them read. But those are few and far between. And I get really concerned about those kids that I see of that. Oops. So if people, let's try this again, just real quick. Let's see if people could do a poll here and see what happens. And I'm kind of curious for those that didn't put anything in the chat box, and try to do another quick poll. And we'll go for 60 seconds on this poll here. All the while, water go down the wrong pipe here. Fascinating. AIS to keep up with content material. Specific reading instruction. Specific reading skill, that's great. Well, that's good so far. You know, in some of the places I go to AIS, they're not sure of how to teach those specific reading skills. But that's great if you're getting that along the way, that I want to know what specific reading intervention are they doing and what specific skill are they trying to address and attack. And that's what I'm going to make sure about in AIS all the time, that as a school psychologist, I would get a kid, they're like, well, he's been in AIS for 3 years. That's why he should be identified with special education needs. And then I'll say, right, F&P, God help us, right? Hopefully there's not Von Spinell. That's very good, Kayla. I'm like, so why do I care that the kid was in AIS for 3 years? That means nothing to me. What specifically was going on in AIS? And they'll tell me, well, she's been getting AIS. I go, great, but what happened? And then they tell me that she's getting math worksheets. So in essence, I had no clue what specific intervention was being done for that kid. And that kid was not taught for 3 years how to do math. And I am not going to identify that kid with a learning disability. So good. Thank you for doing the poll. I appreciate that. That's working out well. Because ultimately, it's, you know, thank God for all my student loans. I know this, right? Thank God for graduate school that I know this for somehow, right? But it really is more about doing the right intervention. And so what interventions do we know? And I'll share some of those websites so that you can get a sense of how to build up someone's reading skills, math skills, and writing skills. And we can do a better job of assessing whether it's truly a learning disability or not. Because not every student who struggles in school is disabled, nor does every student who fails a state test has learning problems due to a specific learning disability. And specific learning disability should never be for the convenience of adults, nor for the child to get any extra help. If that's the way the system has been set up, we have to make sure that this language is used to help out everybody to understand that special ed is not getting the kid extra help. But often they use that so the kid has extra time, maybe on the Regents exam, rather than trying to provide them with the right skill that they need to learn how to read, write, do math, or behave. That the secondary level, we have to be concerned about credits and graduation. We also have to be concerned about scheduling is a nightmare. I was in one room in the Albany School District here, which has thousands of kids. It was like the biggest room. I didn't know where I walked into. I thought it was just a bunch of like a Hall of Fame names, but there were names on every single wall, and they're just trying to work out. And you moved one piece, everything would collapse. But at the high school level, you're really good at scheduling because that's what you're used to versus the elementary school. With the high school, you understand scheduling. And so what Mark Shin has talked about is that some people have put in a period that's for remediation and acceleration. So you have one period that's for both remediation and acceleration. So all the kids are getting what they need throughout the school day. And so that remediation period might be your tier 2 time to address specific skills. Even that is difficult, but at least everyone is getting something from that. but trying to get multiple teachers on the same page, but not, we have that at the elementary schools, but not the secondary. That's interesting. Okay, great. But it can be done at the secondary level. The communication between teachers. Communication is going to be key, but also this mindset that we don't have time to address the basic skills because we have to get these kids graduated. That's where understanding the difference between those kids who have difficulty in content and those kids who are falling below. If I do an oral reading fluency, a math fluency, or a writing fluency, those kids who are falling below a certain benchmark, those are the kids who are having difficulty with a specific skill. That's a different AIS than a kid who has difficulty with certain content information. And that's going to help you understand your resources better. Yeah, Terry, I appreciate that. That it becomes assignment completion, not basic skill intervention. If that's the case, and that's a perfect point that's in the chat that Terry put in there, that she has one of those periods for remediation and acceleration, but used for assignment completion. What that tells me is that you have the resources to do good skill development because you have the human capital, one person who has time to teach at that period, and you have time in the schedule to do that. So you have the resources to do something where you're actually teaching a specific skill. Does that make sense? I'm not saying that you're doing anything bad. I'm saying that when, as a consultant, I was like, oh, great. So you have a classroom, you have a person, and you have the time in the schedule to do things. So now let's figure out how to do this period better and what that data is going to look like. Because right now, if you're doing just assignment completion, you're not getting good data to see if that kid's improving on any certain skills. So that helps me out in order to kind of help educators kind of rearrange what they're doing or think about their practice a little bit differently. Because we all say we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have this, but here is something that we do have. That when we promote MTSS, is to make a difficult job of teaching easier. This is stuff that I need to kind of promote all the time. And I need my leadership team to kind of promote this all the time, but nobody believes this. Everyone thinks that MTSS is just an added on thing. It's a nuisance. Just let me teach and I'll tell you who needs special ed or not. That it is a way to increase student achievement. It is a way to increase their behaviors, but it's also the MTSS should provide some type of structure that provides clarity who is served within the interventions and who's served within special ed. That right now, how clear is that? Do you think that is to your educational staff? So we have to try to make this clearer and using our leadership teams to be able to do that. But the big thing is, in going back over and over again, is about tier 1. If all of your kids are below the benchmark, whatever benchmarks you may have, whatever, and I'm talking really 7th, 8th, and maybe 9th, at the 10th, 11th, 12th grade level, you may not have benchmarks for any of that kind of stuff. For those kids in 10th, 11th, 12th grade that you might be concerned having difficulty in reading, I'm going to do an oral reading fluency with that kid. And the oral reading fluency measure I'm going to do is going to be at the 7th or 8th grade level and see where they fall within that. If they fall below that benchmark, does this make sense? If they fall below that benchmark, then they need skill instruction at tier 2 level. I could do more individualized rather than do the whole grade level at 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. You don't need to benchmark 3 times a year at that point. Are people having a heart attack because I say that? Does that make sense? Or it's so hard to kind of read this kind of thing. So, but at 7th, 8th grade level, I could still do at least at the beginning of the year and the end of the year to kind of get to benchmark my kids with oral reading fluency, math fluency, and writing fluency. So I could better identify where my whole class is and how I have to do my scope and sequence. But in terms of the data, I still see lots of confusion around it, right? People just love to say star data. His star data is this. Has anyone had that? He's like, is it a 544, whatever it might be, right? or his map data, or we did NWEA. So he's lower than he's supposed to be. How well does our staff understand the foundational skills in reading, writing, math, and social emotional functioning? Social emotional functioning, to work with your social worker and counselor to kind of see what program you want to put into place. But also for the one person who said that there was no PBIS or whatnot, how many people have a really good tier 1 screening tool to look at depression and anxiety and or suicidality? There are lots of districts that don't want to do that. And I was talking to something that I think Jen, you're on my screen, so that's what I'm thinking about, that you may have like 1,000 kids total in your district, right? Something like that. And another person said, Jennifer Royce said that she had like 500 kids, pre-K through 12, 500 kids. Good God, that was my whole senior class, right? Still, a lot of districts are fearful to do a survey of their students about anxiety and depression and suicidality, because exactly what Christina just put into the chat is that people are going to be concerned we don't have the mental health resources to address all this. So by not assessing to see where kids are at, they're all depressed and all anxious, but because we don't have the data to show it, it means that everything is well and good. That's insane. It means that we have to do a better job at the tier 1 level of addressing our teachers to know how to spot, not diagnose, but how to spot and how to really create better community within their classes for better social emotional functioning. Sarah is also talking about that, some concern just in terms of some of the large districts, how to address some of this. So it's being honest about things. I could tell you that in the different districts I visit, in the conversations I've had with all different educators, oh my God, my district has 206,000 people. That's insane. 206,000? What is that? Good God. That when you give permission for people to acknowledge that they're not sure about reading, writing, math, and behavior, it opens them up to learn more about reading, writing, math, and behavior. But as educators, we're supposed to know about all of it, and we have to let that secret go. We have to be able to acknowledge whatever people were coming into this session for. How could we possibly do a good job of RTI and or any part of MTSS if all the educators are not at least at a qualified level of understanding reading, writing, math, and social emotional behavior? That we have to start working on those folks and using our leadership in order to be able to help them along. The other things, oh my God, it's just crazy information that Sarah's providing here. It's just amazing, Christine and Sarah. That in any conversation, I want to make sure that nobody says any kid is lazy. I've never met a lazy kid in my life. Not a one. And yet in every single meeting I go to, somehow lazy still comes up. It's unacceptable. That's what I say at every place I go to. You know, for these kids who have difficulty reading, what are they reminded about every single day? That they stink at reading. Why would they want to come to, it's a miracle they come to school in the first place. Understand that we're the weirdos, that we actually like school. At least 1/3 of your kids are not going to want to be there at all. Most kids are just like, what am I doing here? No one wakes up going, I can't wait to get my learn on. That's not happening. We have to be able to energize them to do things. But at the same point, I hear that people always talk about their families, because what other people want to do is blame their parents. And that's my dad on the right-hand side, taking his first selfie with me. So he's very upset about that. And of course, I'm a pain in the ass to him as much as I can. But people just put things on parents. That for me, before I used to say that parents only have to house their kid, clothe their kid, feed their kid. That's it. Nothing else. Now, I don't even say that. How many in your district have parents who could barely house, barely feed, barely clothe their kids? If all of your families in your district could barely house, feed, and clothe kids, would your district be successful? The answer has to be yes. Because we are the professionals. We're the ones who are supposed to know about reading. We're the ones who are supposed to know about math. We're the ones supposed to know about social emotional functioning. That the parents have enough to deal with. It's always gravy if parents are involved. It's always great. But that's what you have to take it as, gravy. And what can we do to better help this out? And that's the key to successful MTSS implementation. That are we speaking the same language? I talked about, what does struggling mean? What does progress mean? I have no clue ever when people say about struggling or progress. I don't even know if a C+ is a good grade or a bad grade. It depends on the kid, I guess. Right? What does that mean? So I don't want to say the kid's having a C+. I want to know what specific skill they have and what quantifiable information, not a grade, because nobody knows. Grades are just awful, especially if they're based off of homework. Does anyone still have that policy that you could get a higher grade or lower grade based off your homework? That's awful. So we have to use better terminology for us to understand things. Standard score. I had a parent once say, my kid had a standard score of a 70, so that's good. I was like, what? They're like, yes, he has a standard score of a 70. So that's the standard. So the parent thought that was the standard, so everything was fine. So just because we're comfortable with that language doesn't mean anything. So the same thing that he's reading at a 4th grade reading level, I don't know what that means at all. Are you saying that he has difficulty with his phonemic awareness? Are you saying he has difficulty with his phonics? Are you saying he has difficulty with his fluency? Are you saying he has difficulty with his numeracy, that he doesn't understand rational numbers, that he's not sure about different fractions, that his spelling, that he doesn't know how to look at different morphemes and know how to spell those morphemes? What specific skills? And that's, as a school psychologist, in terms of our consultation, to be able to get people to kind of move at things. Homework is a major topic at IST meetings. It's always very fascinating. Why doesn't this kid do homework? My first question to the teacher is, what's the point of homework? So we have a 90-10 policy. 90% of the grade must come from summative and 10% from formative. So a lot of kids they shouldn't be doing homework. I don't even know what homework's for. Homework is supposed to be a communication tool that I've mastered the skills. Here, teacher, I could show you I've mastered the skills. That's what homework's supposed to be about. But often it's just used as a way that, to kind of either give a kid a higher grade or a lower grade. It's an easy way of doing things, and I understand it. But for those kids who have struggle in, say, math, homework is just to be awful for them because they don't have the skills. That homework is only reinforcing that they don't know the skills that they're supposed to have. So we have to be able to work with folks around that. And I'll show this. It doesn't matter what grade or anything. For an IEP, I can talk about, this is what I get from my ISTs, all this other kind of stuff at the secondary and the primary levels. But that they love to use this language, that Ben has made steady progress in academics. Does anybody know what that means? I have no clue what that means. But he's made strong progress in reading. Is strong progress better than steady progress? And then later on, it talks about how this certain reading is very challenging for him. Well, thank God they said very challenging instead of just challenging. Right? I never understand the use of the word very. It's like, oh, it's challenging, so I don't care. But now that you said it's very challenging, now I care. Anytime anyone wants to write the word very, have them write the word damn instead. It was damn challenging for him. There's no reason to add emotional language to already an emotional issue. So even in our conversation, I want to make sure about that. And then I have Ben struggles to add endings. I don't know what that means. How often is that happening? He needs a lot of. I need to get away from this language for MTSS to be successful, whether it's about social emotional functioning or whether it's about academic. Operationalize the language. Yes, absolutely, Holly. So here, and by the way, this was the IEP, this was the goals based on that previous one. It's very exciting. He's supposed to have 90% success over 2 weeks. And by the way, look at the schedule, how often we're going to look at it, monthly. So that's interesting. He's supposed to have success over 2 weeks. But the thing says, when presented with words, reading narratives, Ben will apply his phonics skills and word analysis skills correctly to decode the words. There was nothing in the PLEPs that gave us any baseline. So let's say he's able to do 80%. Would 90% be a good goal? Let's say he's able to do 0%. 90% would be just crazy as a goal. There's no reason for that. But how many conversations have you had at either the pre-referral meetings or any meetings that you have at some of the schools in terms of that he's having difficulty in reading, and we're going to get into 90% because 90% looks like a good number. We do have to operationalize the language all the time. And so here was another one. If you look at the last sentence here, where it says a written expression probe was administered. He wrote 35 words, 33 were spelled correctly, and he had a correct writing sequence of 31 words. A typical sixth grader writes 60 words, 58 correct spelled words, correct writing sequence of 56 words. So this kid wrote a total of 35 words, where most kids his age write 60 words. And nowhere does it say struggling. Nowhere does it say anything like that. It gives quantifiable information. So if you want the MTSS to be able to work, we do have to operationalize, we do have to talk in quantity so that we can write better goals to know what's going on. Because this is also going to impact that how do kids get into AIS, by the way? At most secondary schools, it's because they got a low, either they failed the Regents or they got a low grade on a statewide exam. They got a 2 or 1. Yes, no, am I right about this? That's how they get into AIS, typically. Right. Failing 2 more classes, secondary, right? Okay. That teacher referral. I love that teacher referral. I just feel like he is having difficulty. I'm the psychologist that doesn't care about your feelings. Show me the quantifiable data that kid might be struggling, because guess who gets referred the most? It's going to be pain in the asses, who are usually boys, who are usually from minoritized groups. And those kids get referred the most. Attendance issues, that's a little bit different in terms of things. That's a whole nother can of worms. But that, how do kids get out of AIS? That I see kids languish in AIS, that are there specific quantifiable information to get the kid out of AIS. And if people have any, and by the way, if I go through any of this and people have some of those, that quantifiable data that needs to be collected, generally they don't get out of AIS. Absolutely. That's what I find. That what's the point of AIS? The point of AIS is to teach them a specific skill to get them out, and so they can do better in tier 1. So what is that data to get out of AIS? And does the kid know how to get out of AIS? And by the way, when I say get out of AIS, it sounds like prison already. And we can't make it like that. It has to be about teaching a specific skill. You've been successful. Bravo to you. Now we could use this time for other things. You know, when we talk about RTI, that this language is not known by most of the faculty, that everyone doesn't have the same definitions along the way. That that the tier 1 is with all students in a gen ed setting. If all the kids are below a certain level, I need to do a class-wide intervention. Now, when I said do a class-wide intervention, that's kind of abstract, and I'll show you different things to kind of, you know, different websites to kind of look some of that up. But that's hard for educators to do because they're not sure how to kind of change the scope and sequence and how to kind of like maybe use 10 minutes of the period to address either math skills, writing skills, or reading skills for that whole class. So that's core instruction. And then you make these accommodations or instructional adjustments, which is Jim Wright's language, which I like. The kids are expected to do this, have the same standards, but they have different ways of access to it. So when I look at accommodations, that again, these are often used as interventions or talked about as interventions when they are just accommodations or instructional adjustments. They're not teaching a kid a specific skill. I've sat on a lot of RTI meetings or IST meetings or whatever it might be, and they talk about like, well, we'll move them close to the board, we'll put them with this group. Those aren't teaching those kids the specific skills. So you could chunk classwork, guided notes, how to use highlighter. How many of you were taught how to use a highlighter, by the way? None of you, most likely. But we all used it, but none of us were ever taught how to use it. And we used it badly. We just highlight. And we even highlighted the bolded font, which makes no sense. What are we doing? It actually is a good tool to use if we teach kids how to use it. Using a book on tape, an overall student to give them assignments, breaking that into smaller chunks to kind of do. Frequent summarization, making sure the text is tied to the lecture. Do quizzes that don't count towards anything. So kids get used to what quizzes are and to give me some information about what the kids know. That's a good instructional adjustment as a whole class, using practice tests to help folks. And on Intervention Central, this is still there. It's called the Accommodation Finder. And they have a whole list of things and describes exactly how to use it. It's great. But how often do teachers say, well, I did a whole accommodation for the whole class, or I did accommodation for that one kid and it didn't work? Well, it's September 5th. How long did you actually give it to work? And what does work mean? What does that data mean? So it really comes back down to all the quantifiable data, because if I had a teacher who came to me and said, my kid is standing up 100 times a day, what is the fantasy of that teacher? What does that teacher want besides get the kid out of the class? Usually what I'll tell the teacher is that, well, because I'm a fancy schmancy school psychology, we're going to give them down to 0 times a day in 3 weeks' time. And the teacher says, that's not possible. I go, but no, that's why you came to me. They go, that's not possible. I go, right, it's not possible to get that kid to 0 anytime soon. Maybe after 3 weeks, we could get them down to maybe 85, 80 times. And if we're able to get them down in 3 weeks at about 80, which is still way too much, it's still better than 100. But without the quantifiable information, the 80 is going to feel like 100. And the teacher is going to say, I feel like this kid is not getting any better, which is not fair to the kid and it's not fair to the teacher. Because the teacher's working their tail off, and so is the kid. So we have to be able to make all this work. How are we being using the objective language, and how are we using good quantifiable information? So a modification, one kid gets 5 problems instead of 20. It changes the expectations. It's not the same standards as the accommodations. But that the intervention is teaching a new skill, building fluency in a skill, and encouraging application of the skill. It is not ESL. And I don't mean English as a second language. I mean English slower and louder. That is not what an intervention is about. You didn't understand it in the regular class? Fine, I'll say it slower. Table, table. That's not going to help out the kid. It has to be teaching that kid a specific skill in a specific manner that's explicit and systematic. So is that truly going on in AIS? And do we have the data to back ourselves up with that? And this is the biggest one. And to make sure that people are out of this language. And help me out. Do people often talk about, well, let's get them speech language, or let's get them AIS, or let's get them tier 3? It's about what is the intervention that they're going to get, not about what service they're going to get. That a service is not an intervention. I don't want to conflate the two at all. And to make sure that everybody has that same language. I talked about this earlier, that we have to make a distinction between support and intervention. There are some kids who definitely need some support in terms of like getting their homework done. That's fine. I know schools do it to further explain a concept, opportunity for additional practice. But an intervention is designed to address a specific skill. So I want to do the best job I can, not a perfect job, but to distinguish the two, to give clear instruction to whichever educator is working with that kid to help out that kid at the end of the day, and not to necessarily mix and match. This is one of the bigger things in terms of the secondary versus the primary level. That how well are we distinguishing the two? I'm going to take a pause here for a second because I've been talking for an hour and a half. Is everyone good? Everyone still with me? Yes, give me some feedback because God help me, I'm talking to a void kind of thing. Hopefully this is on target. Yes, how am I doing, Jen? Is it okay, right? Yes, secondary stuff, good.
Great for me. My head is
Yes,
spinning.
okay, sure, thank God, okay, good. Oh boy, I'm taking my little sips of water along with, thanks, see, like, yay, okay, good feedback. Okay, I just need a little feedback. Good. I did a 6-hour presentation once, and there was no faces on the screen whatsoever. So I just talked into a void. So good God, I have enough alone time. You don't want me to be alone with my thoughts. It's just not good. So it's just terrible. So good. So thank you for this. I appreciate this. Yes, I could do this weekly as much as you like. So please give me a call or send me an email. And again, I'm sharing this email and I'll share a whole bunch of resources with you via Dropbox and whatnot along the way. That how well do we know what explicit instruction is? That what does that really look like? And this is something that we just really try to understand. And what I like to do is to talk to teachers that's outside of the referral process. Just a teacher I know, to kind of hang out with, tell me what your definition is of explicit instruction. Because now we're not in this emotional state of a referral. And I could understand where that teacher is coming from. And it's a much safer environment to talk to a teacher, especially at the secondary level, as to what's going on. And I could get a sense of what's happening around them. And so that I can maybe then, if I do an observation, or if I want to talk to, if that teacher does refer somebody, I know what questions I need to ask to help that teacher along in my pre-referral meeting or my RTI meeting, whatever it might be. That how often, especially at the secondary level, on your IST referral forms, by the way, IST, CST, I was one district, they had the PSST, so they were the PST. So I don't know what that is, but okay, right? But that's, I'm just looking at the chat here. Even in K-12 schools, population of 100 or less, extra resources used to push on students to remind kids they're behind. Relationships should improve. Gains or goals. Teaching is a tool, but what's learning about? What questions do we ask in terms of, so do you think it's an issue of acquisition? Do you think it's a fluency issue? Do you think it's a generalization issue? Is it can't do, won't do? And what teachers and educators, and rightfully so, they are busting their hump. They want the kids to be successful. No one means any malice whatsoever. Teachers, all educators are, I don't know how any of you have gotten through this year up to this point. It is a miracle. I'm just floored by it. It's really stunning of the success that all these different districts have had. You've had people not be able to drive buses. You've had people not be able to do substitute teaching. You've had teachers out. I don't know how you've been able to piecemeal all this together somehow. But that how are we then, in terms of what we're asking the educators, so they get a better sense of things, because it gets too overwhelming. They say this kid can't read, they can't write, they can't do math, and their behavior is just awful. Now go fix them. I've been in way too many meetings like that. Right? The kid's been abused, he's also doing drugs, he also can't read, he can't do math, he can't write. So now what? Pre-referral team. That's a damn good question. You want us to attack all of that? And by the way, we have 15 minutes to go through this kid. That we have to be able to triage. We have to have quantifiable information. So we get the information, we know exactly what we need to do right away. We have no time for this. We need cross-curricular supports. There has to be a shared responsibility between that. There's a certain there are lists of vocabulary that I'll provide you that's at the 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. That's from vocabulary for math, vocabulary for literature, vocabulary for science. A lot of those vocabulary words overlap. I want the science teacher, the English teacher, the math teacher, everybody to know that these are the vocabulary words that we have to be using all the time to build everybody's vocabulary. And that's be part of our daily lessons. This bank of words will always be part of our daily lessons. And will in fact break down those words into their Latin and Greek and Italian and French roots. Because that builds up vocabulary for other words that are coming around, which then increases comprehension for all kids. Because at the 10th, 11th, 12th grade level, they're starting to see these crazy words. They need to know how to break those words down to build their vocabulary and to understand what that word might mean. Gradual release teaching. It's interesting, just how do you engage with guided practice with students? How do you provide independent practice? How do you help them apply and generalize some of those skills? This is some of the information that I want to know. Especially if all the kids in this year in 8th grade, let's say they're all at a 6th grade level, the scope and sequence has to change. And how are they going to teach these explicit skills so they all still reach some of the 8th grade standards? And to alleviate some of that stress from the educators. So, so just to give some language that I think is vital, is around what is reading, because it is so much of what we do besides some of the mental health stuff that we are definitely addressing all the time. So there's just too many things to address. That it's not so simple, but here are some great books to read. I love David Kilpatrick. The book on the left is great. It's an easy read, has some really good information on it. The book on the right is a great book, but a difficult read. So the book on the left is the Spark Notes or the Cliff Notes to the book on the right. So I'm all about Spark Notes, Cliff Notes. So you can get the Equipped from Reading Success on the Reading League website, but it's a great book. That book in the middle, I think is one of the best books I've read that explains research in a consumable manner. Like each article is better than the next. I can't believe it. It's just like, oh my God, that was easy to read, but it's still researchy. So I dig it. Here is what reading is. Reading is decoding. You have to be able to read the words. And when you're able to read the words, you understand what the words mean, or language comprehension. So it's decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. That if you're able to decode words just fine, just immediately with automaticity, that student that we listen to, can that kid decode appropriately? Not really. She was able to read certain words that she recognized, but her decoding is weak, so her comprehension will be weak. So if I do a simple math problem, that if a kid has good decoding, a 1, and good language comprehension, understands the vocabulary that they read, a 1, 1 times 1 equals 1. But if I don't understand the words I'm reading, I can't comprehend. So for example, if I read Spanish, I could read it just fine, but God help me if I know what the hell I'm reading. My comprehension would be low. But the same thing, if I don't have access to the text and decoding, then I can't comprehend. I had a kid recently, he's in 9th grade, and he told me that he stutters when he reads. I don't know if anyone's had that. I've never had any kid tell me he stutters when he reads. I was like, what? I don't know what that means. He said, when I come across a word that I don't know, I get stuck on it, but then I just guess at the word. He just throws in a random word. And people were wondering why his comprehension stinks. He's literally throwing in just random words to get through the passage. And by the way, his vocabulary wasn't so great. So the words he could read, he couldn't understand. So that's a problem. So when I look at this, that if a kid has good language comprehension skills, not listening comprehension, just language comprehension skills, that is their outer limit of their potential reading comprehension. So don't you have some kids who could talk up a storm that whatever they watched on the History Channel, they know everything about cars? They know all that. So what do? We give them a book about cars, right? Isn't that what we do? Because that's what they love, cars. Meanwhile, they can't read any of the words. How much are they going to love that book? In fact, they're going to be more frustrated because they want access to that book because they want access to that information. It's not until I teach them how to decode will they be able to comprehend that book, even though they have incredible background knowledge around that. Does that follow? Isn't that what we're doing to a lot of our kids at the high school level? That what we're doing is we're doing a lot of interventions at the high school level to help them with comprehension rather than teach them the skills they need for comprehension or to build up their vocabulary. And we'll get into math in a moment as well. So ultimately, when I look at reading, is that on the top right, if I have good language processing and I have good decoding skills, that kid is a typical reader. But a kid who cannot recognize words, but has good language, they can't decode but has good language, that's dyslexia. The kid doesn't know how to decode. I want all my educators to know this is what I mean by dyslexia. And when I talk about dyslexia, it's not a visual spatial issue, it's completely auditory. It's a visual input, but all language, all reading, all words are stored auditorily. And I need all my educators to know that, because how often have I had teachers come to any of these referral meetings and say, he has dyslexia. I'm like, oh, good God, do you know what you're talking about? And we have to make sure we have the same language. So I'm not going to go past that. So here is that people love to put out this rope, whatever it is. Kids need all this information to be successful readers. How well, as school psychologists, do we know how to do good interventions around some of this? And I'll provide some websites to give you good interventions. And when I talk about an intervention, I mean it's about maybe a page long of information for you to do an intervention. But this, it really is more, and get ready for a heart attack, it's this. God help us. This is where so much is going on. That I like this slide because it just reminds me of the complexities of reading and writing. And it also gives me a sense of what questions I need to ask and what do I need to think about for each kid or for that classroom. How well is this classroom addressing language expression? How well is this classroom in ELA at the 11th grade level dealing with language comprehension? How are they dealing with the written word recognition? That I could do an observation around that so I get a better sense, so I could do a better job of providing interventions. I like to do observations if the teacher allows me, and a lot of teachers will typically do it. Just let me get a sense of what your lesson is. No kids, I'm not watching any kids. I just want to know what's being taught so I can do a better job when other people come to IST. Just by the way, I do a lot of cognitive and academic assessments. I actually put the formula into my report now, and I'm happy to share templates in my report about the simple view. My report all goes back to this passage, which is at the very beginning of my report. So everything I talk about is based off of this formula. So I'm happy to give that out. This is a great document that gives lots of definitions to different terminology about reading. So if I look at, here's what morphology is. How many people know the definition of morphology? Not many. So here's a good definition to kind of read. Here's what vocabulary means. It tells the why of everything, why we're doing everything that we're doing for phonological awareness, phonics. These are all the basic big ideas of reading. And what exactly is comprehension? Comprehension is a culmination of all those skills. So when someone comes to me and says, my class has difficulty in comprehension, my next question is, well, how are they doing with phonics? How are they doing with decoding? How well do they understand this? Before we even get to comprehension. If they're doing great in all that, great. Now I know we need to deal with comprehension intervention skills. That's a different story. Go past that. Just as a quick little thing, I always like this because we don't spell words, we don't write words. We write sequences of characters that represent the sounds of words. So when people do spelling lists as visual memorization, it doesn't work. It's all auditory. Spelling is auditory. And we're just putting out symbols. Okay. I wish I could get to this, it's sad. I love her, Dr. Cardenas Hagen. She does a great job, and this is Middle Tennessee State University. Go watch this video if you need to work with children who are English language learners. I wish I had more time to talk about this. We haven't. I feel I'm upset about that. But she's terrific. I mean, just really just lays it all out. A very engaging video that she has. And her book, Literacy Foundations for English Learners, is awesome. It's an easy book. Look, I had it right by it. It's a little tiny book. Super great. Literacy Foundations for English Learners by Cardenas Hagen. She's terrific. So let me just go back here. Okay. You're not a visual learner. There's no such thing as visual auditory learner. It's a funny video. Ha ha ha. Good. That's funny. It's a funny joke. Okay, good. So here is a really nice website called the Reading League. They have lots of different resources for you, and especially explaining about reading, and they deal with some reading at the secondary level. Easy videos to watch, Reading League. Lifelong literacy. Lynn Stone is awesome. She has a great book called Reading for Life. If you get the book Reading for Life, each chapter is about 4 pages long, and there are pictures, for God's sake. It'll help you understand how to address reading. And there are different lesson plans in there. But she has different webinars that are terrific and really help out, especially the Spelling for Life I love. It's great. And she has an Australian accent, so it's even better to listen to her the whole time. So, just quickly in terms of the balanced literacy stuff, which came out of the Teachers College in Columbia, you had folks from the Teachers College do a review on balanced literacy, like Mtss and Pinnell. And what they found, so you have to deal with your districts that are doing Mtss and Pinnell, that what they found is that this program is unlikely to lead to literacy success. Right there should be a full stop of why we're doing this curriculum. And these kids who were taught under Mtss and Pinnell or balanced literacy are coming to your secondary level, and they're having difficulty reading because of not because of any malice, they just weren't taught how to read appropriately. That kids who need additional practice opportunities in a specific area of reading or language development likely would not do well in this. It goes on to say that the impact is most severe for children who don't come to school already possessing the skills that they need. And these students are not likely to get what they need from units of study to read, speak, and listen at grade level. What exactly is a curriculum for except to help the kid read, write, and speak and listen correctly? Okay. Well, what bothers me the most is that the specific finding in the report is that it fails to systematically and concretely guide teachers to provide English learners the supports they need to attain high levels of literacy development. What do we have? Then we have a high rate of identification of English learners in terms of needing special education when they're really in need of an education that's special to teach them how to read. So we have to understand that at the secondary level. The book on the right, this is from Parker Phonics. The book on the right, the blue book, is an awesome book. If you read Lynn Stone's Reading for Life and you read this reading instruction in phonics, you'll have a really good sense of reading. And also help out all your secondary folks about how to do good interventions. Those 2 books, that'll set you up for anything else you learn about. Absolutely. I'm gonna sit down for a little bit here, so it's a little weird. some great resources. Again, you'll have this PowerPoint. If you email me again, so I'll put my email in the chat again, or Jen, if you want to put my email in the chat, that's fine. And you're welcome to email me for the PowerPoint, and also I'll create a Dropbox with a bunch of resources as well, different documents and whatnot. So here's different vocabulary resources to build up people's vocabulary. The second to last one, core. If I'm all behind my magic screen here, where is it? Do I have it? I don't have it. The core literacy. It's a little pricey, the book, but it's a great book at the secondary level, core literacy. So if you go to core literacy, so core literacy, C-O-R-E, literacy, and they have a vocabulary book, and they have one big main book that gives a whole bunch of different lessons in regards to morphology. It also has lots of assessments that you could use in tier 2, tier 3. It's a great book. I love that book. The Texas Center for Learning Disabilities. All this is free materials, all about lesson plans around comprehension, vocabulary, fluency, word recognition, all effective instruction, all free, all different chapters. If you want to know more about comprehension, the Reading Comprehension Blueprint is a really wonderful book, as well as the effective instruction for middle school students with reading difficulties. I like them both. I like the one on the left easier. They also have a Facebook page. The Reading Comprehension Blueprint has a Facebook page. There's lots of free resources. Again, I'm sorry that I know I have about 10 minutes left. Is everyone good to go for another 10 minutes? Everyone still good? I'll go 15 minutes, so I'll go to 3:05. Is that okay? So we'll go 3:05. So I apologize about that. I don't want to rush through some of this. I hate it that people, presenters like me, we rush at the end. What the hell is that? You know, this is like the big part here. So it makes no sense. But I like this because this, again, this is in that Reading Comprehension Blueprint book. This helps me ask questions. So which words do your students need to know? Which are worth noting? What are the phrases, clauses, sentence structures that may be difficult for the students? I generally don't know to ask these questions because it's just not part of what I was taught as a school psychologist. What do we know? We know comprehension. We don't really understand what comprehension's about. Not out of malice, not out of anything, but boy, it has made me think about comprehension in a much different manner so I could ask better questions and help out teachers, especially at the 10th grade. I can meet with the whole English department and then meet with them and kind of go through some of these questions to better understand. And I keep my own notes around that, and I build out my IST around that. This is a great website. I say don't go to it, although it's awesome. But look how many different it leads you to a whole bunch of other websites, and this is too overwhelming. It's just way too much. It gives you way too much information. But if you want to go to something that has everything, they keep updating this damn thing. It's just, it gives me agita. So, but it's great. For those who like podcasts, the Science of Reading podcast is terrific. They talk about every single issue that may impact reading. Really good stuff. Let's click on the chat here. Okay, good. Let me just go back here. 95 Live, phonemic awareness for older readers. See where it says replay and handouts? You click on that, you give them your email. They don't bother you with another email. The email is just to get you the handouts. But you don't get any spam. But it gives you exact interventions to do for those phonemic awareness for older readers. And they have they have some great webinars. Adult Phonics Library. I belong to this group, Science of Reading, 3rd grade and beyond. Everyone see the part on the right? See, it says like user-friendly definition, active participation, Meltzer, all that kind of stuff. All that's free material to build your knowledge base around reading. All free, all good stuff. And they have good conversations on that. I have the nerdiest Twitter feed and Facebook feed there is. People get all anxiety because of politics. I'm going through my Twitter feed. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know this about, I have math, I have reading, I have writing. I don't know what, there's so much I don't know, but I need to build my skills around that. Patan is awesome. P-A-T-T-A-N, super great. Lots of good information. So I'm going to move past this. So in turn, everyone knows about oral reading fluency. I'm just going to go past that a little bit here. But if you go to Acadiance reading, or Acadiance, and there's another one for math in a moment, which I'll get to. It talks about this gated system. That it's not just which kids are below benchmark, but then you may want to do another assessment to kind of see which kids really might need a different type of intervention based on another type of assessment that you're going to do. And so it's an interesting gated system, and they lay it all out for you quite nicely. So you're not wasting all this time doing all this assessment. And again, this is 7 and 8. I'm not talking about 10, 11, 12 in so many ways. At the 10th, 11th, 12th grade levels, that if you suspect a kid has difficulty with their comprehension skills, what I want you to do is do an oral reading fluency at the 7th or 8th grade level, see if they're below benchmark. And now I have a different issue than comprehension. Does that make sense? I need to be more efficient at the assessments that we're doing. And by the way, anytime we talk about assessments, teachers get very upset, rightfully so, because they're doing way too many assessments as is. So we need to make sure that they understand that any assessment we ask them to do is going to be simple and easy and give them immediate information that's helpful to them, not like STAR and not like MAP. STAR and MAP are great, but they take a while to get the information to the teacher. So they have all the benchmarks there for you, so most of you know this. Yeah, I want to get past this. Well, I want people to kind of, this is what I hear often. Harry struggles to be a fluent reader, is not meeting 7th grade reading benchmark. He makes a lot of mistakes, current reading at 3rd grade level. He also has difficulty answering comprehension questions. That's my referral. Do other people get this referral? I get this referral all the time. I don't know what it means. I want them to say this. Harry's reading a median of 55 words correct per minute when given 7th grade text, while his peers are reading 120 words. This makes sense to me. The first one makes no sense to me. So for an effective MTSS, and we could do this with behavior, I could do this with writing, I could do this with math. If we don't have good language here, we're not going to do a good job by this kid. Not because of any malice, not because of anything, but nobody knows what exactly is going on. But here, this is by, oh God, I can't remember, I'm forgetting his last name. But if you go to Partners for Learning, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. I'm sure many of you use MAP or Easy CBM. Yes, I'm sure some folks have that at the 7th, 8th grade level. This kind of lays out how you're going to think about kids. And what are those benchmarks, 40th to 74th percentile? But you see in the strategic where it says 21st percentile to 39th percentile? What happens if all of your students in your class in 7th grade is at the 21st percentile? Then my tier 1 has to be the phonics and the comprehension. Does that make sense? They're all below. You can't say that I'm going to be teaching them regular content kind of thing. I need to address phonics and comprehension. So that's a big issue. That what the teacher's going to say is that the kids doesn't understand anything I'm doing in reading. Well, we have to address this, and that's why with Easy CBM, which would be an oral reading fluency measure, would get us that sense of things. And I could do that at the high school level as well. That if you go to Partners for Learning, he provides all that information for you. Really good stuff. In terms of AIS, that a lot of what we also have to help out people is to understand scheduling and to know how to schedule kids. So if you look at this, this is a small group literacy instruction for middle school students. If you look up Deborah Reed, R-E-E-D, Deborah Reed, and it's D-E-B-O-R-A-H, Deborah Reed, here's a whole bunch of schedules. And so what you see here is like 10 minutes for this, 10 minutes for this, 10 minutes for this, 10 minutes for this, move, move, move. If you are switching and you're doing good switching throughout the day, you're going to have less behavior problems or less ADHD issues, that you're moving. Everyone's active throughout the whole process. Here's another one. If I have two groups, on Mondays, we're going to do vocabulary morphology. And then the last part of the day, we're going to do comprehension text reading. Everybody knows what Monday is. During last year, I don't know what happened in your schools, but good God, my neighbors are saying, well, on the every other orange day, it's really an apple day, and the kids go to this school. But on the banana day, they have gym, and they have everybody knew the schedules backwards and forwards. They were coming up with this crazy information that they all knew by heart, but kids would know this by heart. And now they know exactly what you expect from their reading lessons within AIS. So there are a whole bunch of schedules that I'll provide along the way. Here's a reading block format where this person's a high school teacher with students who are reading like at a second or third grade level. A really nice schedule about that. So I do want to get to math, and it's 3:01, so I'll stop at 3:05. So I'll get through it. Thank you for your patience. And I will stay on after if people have questions. So people, whatever it is, and I appreciate everyone's time and patience with me. That the science of math, this is all by Amanda Vanderhayden, who I love, super great. She gives me great information. But the science of math is just terrific. Look at those great definitions that we have, much like the science of reading. And if you got this month's communique, read it, because what it talks about is in terms of where we have oral reading fluency, where we can know like a certain slope or whatever we need to do. We can't do that with math fluency. That you cannot provide that the math fluency that we've been doing in the past. Now I've been teaching in the past, and now I need to change my teaching practices, which is where you have a worksheet that has different skills to kind of see if the kid makes the right progress throughout the year. That is not effective because it's not sensitive or specific to understand about a kid's real needs. It's about doing some math fluency, like just all double-digit addition and counting up how many digits correct with that. That's going to be a mastery type of probe that we're going to do to see if the kid has those addition or subtraction or multiplication skills. And there are certain benchmarks and cutoffs that's had, and that's written in those articles as well. So it's a much different way of looking at that. There is no, that's more about mastery and less about GOM kind of stuff. I definitely encourage people to read that. Here is what Amanda put together as well in terms of what are those certain skills and what we need to screen throughout the year at different grade levels, including 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level. That if kids are successful with all these, they will be successful later on in high school. So it's just nice to know what this all means, because ultimately I get people saying he has difficulty in math, but then I have to say, so does he have difficulty with distributive property of expression? Does he have trouble with mixed fractions? I need to use language that the math teachers will understand. So that's the fluency stuff here. The book by Ponce is great. The Math Teacher Lounge is awesome as a Facebook page. And this is what I'm going to do next. That I'm going to this website, and it's the National Center for Intensive Intervention, and it goes a whole bunch of videos so that you understand better about what is math. And each video is maybe about 20 minutes long, and they're about 5 or 6 modules. All downloadable, all free. You see how it says complete slide deck on the left there? And the whole workbook is there. Here is what the science of math is really built on. And so how can I help out a kid with math if I don't understand what this is about? So this is my next thing that I've been doing a lot of work for the last 2 years about reading. Now I need to do a lot of work around math to build up my skills to be a better school psychologist. And that craziness, these two things are free. I've been reading these multiple times. They came out in 2019 and 2021, I think. And so your math teachers should have this. Everybody, the whole IST should have this and read it. It breaks things down quite simply. It tells what has strong evidence, what has very low evidence. They're easy reads. Acadience Math. They have, so it's this long manual that explains everything. It tells you how to interpret the math data. It talks about concepts. It talks about how to guide to do any assessments. All the assessments are quick. They're easy to do. And it's an easy thing to implement right away. For writing, you have the simple view of writing, and I'll stop here in a second here. This also tells you just the skills that should happen for writing. It's not so simple. The Writing Revolution is a great book. And the last thing I'll get to, funny joke, very good, funny joke here. If you go to the Center for Multi-Tier System Support, you have the considerations for multi-tier system support implementation at the high school level, and it has good questions that you need to ask. So I'm sure you have RTI teams or MTSS teams. Hopefully you have MTSS teams at the very least. And even if you don't, you have one team of leaders that's a part of every damn committee anyway. So just give it to them. So it's the same people on every committee all the time. So it's just a really good tool just to reflect and kind of think about things. They also have how to address fidelity of implementation. Right? Each of those two things are a 2-hour presentation themselves. I'll stop there for those who want to leave. So I'll just stop there, but I'll stay on for another 20 minutes if people want and answer questions if people want, not a problem. But I appreciate all your time. I'm sorry that I was just kind of talking at you. I don't like that. I like to be with people. Hopefully it was somewhat entertaining and gave some good information and it was at the secondary level and touching on some of the things that we have to deal at the secondary level. But thank you. I wish you well. I wish you health. Really stay safe. I think about you all the time and the work that you do, and it just inspires. So thank you for it. Really, it's great. And vote in the NASP elections, for God's sake. Don't forget to do that. So good. I'll be here for another 20 minutes. And everyone leaves, that's okay. My parents leave me all the time, so that's fine. So do what you got to do. Thank you.
That was fabulous. My head is spinning.
Right.
I can't wait to look through some of these resources.
Good.
And I definitely need the PowerPoint because I need to go back through and process.
So,
Yes. I have a lot that I'm going to share with my RTI team.
Good.
Definitely.
I hope so.
Definitely. So
Hey,
great.
Andrew, it's Lynn. How are
Yeah, hey,
you?
Lynn. Very good. How you doing?
You need to do this for our conference next fall on Long Island, please.
Oy, then I got to write up a whole summary. Then I get rejected.
No. I mean, nobody does RTI down here. Nobody understands any of this.
I know.
So you and I need to talk about how you're teaching this to your grad students. I know that wasn't the focus here,
Okay.
but nobody teaches it.
Okay. Yeah.
Andrew,
Did I hit on something? Go ahead, Jennifer.
you need to get on with Google Drive.
Goddamn Google. I hate Google.
I just wanted to trigger you, that's all.
Oh, good God. Google. Gia, good to see you, Gia. Yay. So happy. Oh my God. So nice to see you. So happy. Any questions or all? Did I hit on some of the main point? Like, is it, I didn't want to just like look, I didn't want to just look at a problem, but also just, yes. I mean, is that?
Yeah, no, I think you did a great job. Really. I feel like we should do more of these as like NIAS chapters and open it up to all of the chapters. You know, maybe as chapter reps, we need to talk a little more and coordinate, because when we do things, I know you wanted to get together in person, but I think that this worked really well given everything with COVID that's going on too. But There were a lot of people that were on here were outside of chapter I, and I think
Yeah.
that's really great. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we,
I think we had a
provided
total of
something-
like 57, 58.
Yeah.
I saw. Yeah.
Are you gonna do the same for I saw you doing something for Nassau County?
Yeah, so I'm doing, it'd be some of the same.
Same
Some-
presentation, I meant open it up, we should open it up.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So we'll open it up and I'll start promoting that. I didn't want to promote that one over this one. So I
This
got to
one,
promote
yeah.
that one, and then I'm also going to Vermont for some crazy
Just
reason.
sent it out to the chapter today, because I got it today. And interestingly, both of the new NIAS chapter reps from Nassau County are former students of mine from
Right,
two different programs.
right.
But they didn't know about offering it for credit, so I had to email them back about that.
So is that Miss Kayla? Miss Kayla. Oh, hi. Miss Kayla. Oh my God, how you doing? Yay, rock on. So exciting to see my alums.
I know. I had a school counselor in here with me just about like MTSS because you had her rolling. I could barely hear you because she was laughing so hard.
Okay, good. That's good.
Is Gary's book available yet? Sounds great.
No, it'll be available in August, supposedly.
so this is a different book. It's not the nuts and bolts. This is a